in 10 minutes here on LBC News.
This is LBC News.
LBC News time, 2 minutes after 2, Thursday, 5th of December. You join me live across the UK. Jim Diamond with you here. And we've been hearing from the courts the following, that three black men who were wrongly convicted of mugging nearly 50 years ago have had their names cleared today by senior judges. Winston True, George Griffiths and Sterling Christie were among a group known as the Oval Four, arrested in 1972 in South London. The case against them was led and relied on evidence from a sergeant who was later jailed himself for conspiracy to steal. Joining me live on LBC News to talk about this case is Julia Smart Q.C. of Furnival Chambers. Good afternoon and thanks for your time.
Good afternoon, Jim.
I mean, how often does something like this happen? Is it common? It's clearly a case based on race.
Well, what I can say is what is uncommon, sadly, is for these sorts of cases to be overturned on appeal by the Criminal Cases Review Commission, referring to the Court of Appeal. It's very difficult to say now, looking back over the years, back to the 1970s, 80s, the bad old days before we had the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, how many of these sorts of practices were widespread.
Absolutely. 45 years, Winston True saying he's been waiting to get this conviction quashed, and also suggesting that anybody out there who may think they've also been treated in a similar way to come forward.
Well, I found listening to the interview with Mr. True very moving. It was quite clear just how much this had waited upon him throughout all of his life and how shocking these miscarriages of justice are. But the difficulty is that so far as the Criminal Cases Review Commission is concerned, they refer a vanishingly low number of cases to the Court of Appeal every year. I'll just give you some statistics from a recent Justice Gap report, that there were 1,439 applications to the CCRC, as it's known, in 2017 into 18. They referred only 19 cases. So that is a rate of 1.23%. So I applaud Mr. True with his sentiments for trying to get those who are the victims of miscarriages of justice to come forward and go to the CCRC, but I do question whether that sort of referral rate makes it a fit-for-purpose organisation.
Yeah, who's making the decisions then? Does that put into question that very point?
Well, of course, the decisions are being made by a group of lawyers. They have to consider, of course, whether there is merit in any appeal, because, of course, they would risk their reputation if they are over-referred. But I ask the question, can it really be that only 1.23% of those people who have made the applications in any given year have a realistic prospect of the Court of Appeal overturning their verdicts?
Well, the Met Police is a very big organisation with a lot of people within it, and clearly this might have been a case of a bad egg, but once again it's showing another bad day for the Met, you could say.
Well, it is, and I mean, it certainly will not be an isolated incident. Some of us may remember, even in relation to this same detective sergeant, the businessman Stephen Simmons, who had his 1976 conviction for stealing mail bags overturned earlier on this year. That's just one officer. So if one goes back to the sort of culture that was prevalent at that time, one can see there'll be very many other men like Winston True and the others out there who have just lived with their miscarriage of justice for all these years without really, in my view, an adequate remedy.
Could this happen even today? I mean, in terms of, does the word of someone in authority hold more weight than a member of the public?
I think it generally does, certainly those appearing in magistrates' courts and Crown courts. It is generally the position that if an officer gives evidence that, generally speaking, they are believed, certainly by magistrates in a magistrates' court and very often by juries. So certainly it is quite probable that these sorts of incidents do occur in this day and age, although one would imagine it would be far less common because there are at least safeguards in place.
Thank you for your time. Joining me live on LBC News this afternoon, Julia Smart Q.C. of Furnival Chambers.
This is LBC News.
It is 7 minutes after 2 right now. Let's move on to another story we're focusing on today, and it is this. Police have released an update on their investigation into a hit-and-run outside a school in Essex on Monday, which killed a 12-year-old boy. Patrick Hildred has more for LBC News.
Detectives have been looking into whether the crash that killed Harley Watt